although Americans do not like the Trump tax cuts that have already been implemented, Republicans have decided that they want to compound their mistakes by passing Tax Cuts 2.0. So this was a proposal by Republicans in Congress this week, and they are essentially proposing to make some of the tax cuts which were set to expire over the next decade permanent. So for instance, they want to make permanent individual tax cuts, small business income deductions, and a larger child tax credit in this 2.0 version. And as we had previously reported, they're also considering lowering taxes on capital gains. So we already have an explosion in deficits as a result of the first round of tax cuts under the Trump administration. This would certainly make the situation a lot worse. As I had mentioned before, the American people don't like the tax cuts as they stand now. About 37% of voters approve of them, 42% disapprove of them, and that's according to Real Clear Politics doing an average of polling on this topic. Now, with that said, Representative Kevin Brady goes on cable news and starts talking about Tax Cuts 2.0 and how fantastic it's gonna be. But later, we're gonna have a CNBC reporter list all the ways it's disastrous. So take a look.
Are you sure you don't want to just consolidate your first tax reform plan to make sure that isn't overturned or repealed? Because I think a lot of Democrats are running on that, aren't they?
Yeah.
In November.
Well, they are running on it, and it's a huge mistake because no one wants to go back to the bad old days where the economy was flat, paychecks were flat, and jobs and companies were moving overseas at record pace. I don't know anyone who wants to go back to that.
Yeah, paychecks are flat, wages remain stagnant. I know that people don't like to talk about that on cable news especially, but wages have not kept up with inflation at all, which is part of the reason why Americans are not buying these tax cuts. It didn't actually help their wages.
So Kevin Brady says nobody wants to go to the back to the bad old days. And Stephen Moore on television, Trump supporter, so-called economist, had said that, oh, well, Trump got GDP above 4 points. And Trump had bragged about how, hey, this is the first time GDP is higher than unemployment in the last 100 years. Even his own White House had to say, yeah, that's not true. He made that up. Okay, of course he made it up. And he can't help himself, he's a pathological liar. But in reality, Obama had 4 quarters over 4% GDP. Do you remember Kevin Brady or Stephen Moore or any of these guys or Trump tweeting like, congratulations Obama, all those wonderful quarters where GDP's above 4%? No, oh, it's the bad old days, oh, we gotta make America great again. Now Trump does it once, they're like,
They know that a single quarter of 4.1% GDP growth means nothing. They know it. They just look, the reason why they're touting the economy is because the economy is real good for them and their buddies. That's what they're doing. They know. I mean, we have a record number of senior citizens filing for bankruptcy. I'm talking about retirement age senior citizens filing for bankruptcy because they can't afford healthcare in America. Okay, we're talking about millennials who will be dealing with student loan debt for the rest of their lives because of how insanely expensive tuition is. And the federal government has no interest in helping them out whatsoever, okay? We're talking about people who are really suffering under this disastrous economy with their stagnant wages. And then you have representatives like Kevin Brady going on television talking about how fantastic everything is. And then he simultaneously defames people who know and say that this is a disastrous system. In fact, I have an example of that. Take a look.
I just wonder, because it just depends on where I look, whether it's Twitter or other places. I've got people telling me that the tax reform did not work. Yeah, I know you try to get the message out a lot, and President Trump tries to get the message out a lot. How can the Democrats run on the economy in November, given where we are right now?
I don't think they can.
They are, though. How?
Yeah, I think it's a huge mistake. You know, the bottom line is I don't think they're worried about tax cuts for the wealthy. I think they're worried about tax cuts for every American because, look, if Washington doesn't have first claim over your earnings and Washington can't spend it, that's a problem for Democrats. We've chosen to really make a modest, smart investment in the economy, which is growing in really significant ways. And we redesigned the code so our local companies in New York, throughout the country, can compete and win anywhere in the world.
So these tax cuts will cost us nearly $2 trillion over the next decade. And that's just the first version of the tax cuts. If they do tax cuts 2.0, it'll be way more. Secondly, again, middle-class Americans didn't see a significant cut in their taxes. Corporations did, the wealthy did. They did not cut corporate tax loopholes, and they lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. Prior to the tax cuts, the effective tax rates, when you take loopholes into account, was 17%. So can you imagine how much lower it's gonna be now that they've lowered the corporate tax rate and they've refused to close corporate tax loopholes? They think we're stupid. That's what I want you guys to get out of this, okay? Kevin Brady should be voted out of office because he thinks you're stupid, and you're not, okay? We know what's happening, we see it in our paychecks. And by the way, as this is all going on, they're having discussions about entitlements reform, right? Let's cut Social Security, let's cut Medicare. That's what we've paid into.
Okay, so I was amused by the adjective that Brady used. Just a modest cut.
Get out of here.
Of $1.9 trillion for all my friends. I don't know why anybody would complain about that. Let's do 2.0. I'm gonna get back to the greed of 2.0 in a second, but I was actually more amused by the CNBC anchor there. First of all, on the lean back, okay? And he's like, well, I do declare, why are Democrats complaining about the economy? Well, okay, so let me explain to you why, okay, Mr. Lean back. Number one, wages, when you take inflation into account, have gone down. So you and your friends on CNBC and all the CEOs you know are making money hand over fist. So in your social circle, everybody's incredibly wealthy. But you apparently can't see outside your own perspective. You're like, I don't know, everybody I know is stinking rich and we love these tax cuts. But wages have gone down for the average American. Okay, point number two, they're dying from healthcare costs and student debt. And it's an albatross around their neck. And do you know what the minimum wage is? Of course you don't, you never thought about it for a second. The minimum wage, you might know that it's $7.25 at the federal level, but over the course of a year, that's $15,000. $15,000 for a year. For all the friends of that CNBC anchor, $15,000 is a blip in their stock market holdings. Yep. They wouldn't even notice the $15,000 if it went down one for a minute, for an hour, etc. They're like, I do declare. Why are Americans upset? Why are Democrats running on this? All of my friends and put on their monocles and say, this is a lovely economy, dear chap, right? Well, the rest of us don't feel that, man. And the fact that you can't see that is amazing.
Right.
And
well,
yeah.
Luckily, there was one CNBC, I should say, reporter who did list all the ways that the tax cut 2.0 plan would be a disaster. And so I want to give her credit. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but I'm going to show you who she is in just a minute. Let's take a look.
Now, there were two big problems, though, with this bill. The first being that it would make the caps on state and local income tax deductions permanent as well. And that's going to anger Republicans in New York, New Jersey, and even in California. This bill is also estimated to cost $627 billion over the next decade. That price tag is pretty high. Now, Brady told Republicans in the meeting that he considers this a modest investment in households and that he believes deficits would be even higher if tax reform 1.0 hadn't been passed.
So it's going to add another $600 billion to the nearly $2 trillion that the first version of the tax cuts is costing us over the next decade.
The idea that deficits would be higher without the tax cuts is laughable, preposterous. No one can actually believe that. He's lying to you through his teeth and he knows it. And then he gets off camera and laughs at you behind your back. So final thing is, why do a second round of tax cuts for the rich when the first round is polling really badly? And that Real Clear Politics average has a couple of issues with it. The more recent polls, it's an average, the more recent polls have the numbers at way lower, right? And in fact, Republicans in a couple of special elections stopped doing ads bragging about the tax cuts in the middle of the elections because it was counterproductive. The more people heard about the tax cuts, the more they hated the Republican. So they know, because they've already pulled their own ads bragging about the tax cuts. They know how unpopular it is. So why would you do another round of tax cuts right before an election? Because they think it might be the last time they control Congress. So it's the last robbery. They're like, look, man, what difference does it make? We're about to get kicked out, or our donors want their return on investment. Let's go in for one last heist. So that's what Kevin Brady and a lot of those CNBC anchors, and to be fair, a lot of the cable news anchors overall, are talking about today, and they just can't understand why you don't want to be robbed one last time. There's a good way to show them. It's in November of 2018. The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.